In this video, I will be covering Final Cut Pro 10, including how you add files, add clips to the timeline, and how you render your footage into a final video. I have been editing videos for YouTube for more than 3 years now, so I can compress your learning curve in this video series by sharing my experience with video editing, empowering you to make stunning videos with hands-on examples that you can do by your own. I assume that you already now have downloaded the sample footage through the link in the description below and installed Final Cut Pro X10 on your Mac either as a trial or paid version. I would highly recommend you to start and stop the video to follow along, and also encourage you to ask related questions in the comment section below. I will try to answer as many as I can of these, as well as possibly include some of them in upcoming episodes. Let's dive in. This is the standard interface, how it looks like when you fire up Final Cut for the first time. It's divided into different sections or panes, and let's start in the right upper corner here with the library. This is basically the place that hosts all your video files and final projects. From this section you can import media into the library, and from this section you can either preview or inspect the video clip that you currently are working on. The bottom part of the program is the timeline, where you can generate a new project which eventually will end up being your final video file. Let's start by importing some media into our library, but let's get organized first. Let's start here in the upper left corner. When the program starts per default, you have an untitled library or database collection here, and you can do several things to that. You can either double click it and then rename it, in this case for video edit, or you can close it and take it away and generate a completely new one. And the advantage of that is you just go here to the menu, and under new there is a library option, and if I press that one, I get a chance to do like a video edit 2. And the smart part here is I can position this collection on any drive that I want, and that makes it very easy if I want to move a project from one computer to another. Then I press save. So now I have my collection up here. And below this collection there is an auto-generated event. An event is basically a label that will allow you to organize your footage much easier. And in this case, it's they always pop in a default one that is equal to the date where the project has been, or the database has been created. So that one I can also double tap, and I can just give it any name that I want. So in this case, sample footage, like that. So let's move on to getting some media in here. And as you probably know, I'm crazy about old castles. So of course I have prepared some sample footage from a castle here nearby that we can use in this tutorial. I do also want to mention that through the link in the description below, you can download this footage. So if you want to follow along, that makes it very easy, because you can use the exact same footage that I'm using here in this video. To import media, I simply press this icon, and a pop-up window will appear like this. And that will allow me to access the whole file structure on my machine, including SD cards that is put into the SD card reader. But for this case, I have stored the footage on my external hard drive under video editing, and it's located under Frederiksborg Castle. And here I have 3 clips that I want to use for this video. From within here, I can preview each clip. So what you can see here is I can see what the clips are containing. I can also play them. I can jump back and forward just by pointing the mouse on different positions here in this mini short timeline. In that way, I can easily determine if the clips are containing the material that I want. But in this case, I want all of them. So I just mark all of them like that. Before I press import, then let me talk a little bit about the right side of this window. Per default, it will always add the footage to the default event that's in your library. You can select another one if that is your wish, but normally I just leave it like that. Then there's another thing, is I always copy the files to the library. And this is because of the reason that I mentioned before. If I want to move a project from one computer to another, then it's very nice that everything is in one location. If you leave the files in place, then your video project will basically break if you move some of the footage or remove the drive that is attached to the computer. So I like having everything assembled in one place. Apart from that, I'm not touching any of this because I have a pretty fast computer. But if you're running on a slower Mac, you might want to consider taking off creating optimized media, which will create a version of the footage that runs much smoother on older Macs. So let's press import all. And what you will see now is pretty smart, because I can actually start, even though it's importing right now, I can start to work on the footage already. And that's pretty convenient, and one of the areas where Final Cut is really a strong tool. There are several ways of previewing and working with your imported clips. One thing is that you can adjust the window or the preview of the clips. You can either make them larger or smaller, or you can extend the duration like that on this. But I think this way is a little bit messy, and I prefer to use the list mode. And the way to access that is by clicking this icon. In this way, you have a list of files that you just imported. You have all the necessary or needed crucial information about the clip in this list. I can easily preview it, what the clip is containing. And I can also watch additional information about the clip in the inspector here on the right side. If I select the clip, I can preview it in the center window. And it easily switches between a preview of the clips just by pressing each individual clip. So that's very handy. And if for some reason the window size doesn't fit in the preview, I can go up here and I can choose a different way of looking at it. This is like blown up at 100%. Or I can just select fit, and then it will make the footage fit inside the window. You can also scale the windows to the size that you prefer if you want to have it in a different way. So that's pretty handy. That part is pretty handy. You can even go to full screen like that if you want to preview the whole thing. Before we start selecting parts of our raw footage that we want to import to our video, we need to create a timeline. And the way we do that is that we press the icon down here called New Project. Then you get a dialog like this, and you can give this a name. So this is like a sample video. So this will be the name of your final video. You can rename it later when you export it, so that's not a big deal right now. The footage that we have recorded is in 4K, but I want to do a 1080p video. Maybe I want to use it for YouTube, so there's no need for doing a higher resolution than that. So I put it at 1080p because that will be the resolution that I render the final output. I'm in Europe, so most of my footage is recorded in 25 or 50 FPS, so I will choose a base frame rate of 25 frames per second. Everything else you can just leave in place. So press OK, and now we will generate an empty timeline down here. As you can see, after generating the project, that will automatically appear in the same location as your sample files. That makes it very easy to have everything located in the same place. You can have more than one project in the same library. That makes it very handy if you want to share video between different video projects. Now we are getting into the more exciting part, where we need to select part of our footage to add to the timeline. And for that, I want to show you something that's pretty smart. I've seen a lot of videos messing around with the mouse clicking here and there, trying to show you how to add footage. But the key is shortcuts. And don't be intimidated by that. Once you learn like maybe 10 shortcuts for Final Cut shortcut, that's a funny wording, you will really appreciate that, because that will tremendously increase your workflow and your speed of your workflow. So let me just show you how this works. And we start by some really simple ones, simple basic ones. Let's start by selecting something from the first clip. I can preview the footage by just scrubbing back and forward with the mouse, but I can also use J and L for scrubbing back and forward into my footage. So if I move backwards in my footage, I press J. If I press L, then I move forward. But in that way, I can easily scrub back and forward in my footage. And if I double tap J, then it will do it twice as fast, and the same with L. So in that way, I can very easily scrub back and forward and find the spot that I want to have here in my timeline. Let's start the scene here. And the way that I indicate my start frame is by pressing I. And what you will see happen here is now the yellow square that starts where my clip actually begins. Let's scrub further through the footage by pressing L until the final frame that I want to include. Let's include this lamp. That looks pretty nice. That will be the end frame of my clip. And the way that I mark that is by pressing O on the keyboard as key out. So the I is key in and the O is key out. So now I have a clip that I want to add to my timeline. How do I get it down to the timeline, you might ask? That's very simple. You'd use another key. You just press E and then it will automatically jump down to the timeline. So that's what happened now. The clip jumped to the timeline because I pressed E. Now the clip might seem a little bit squeezed. Then I have these options by going over here, and this film icon will open an array of options. I can define or I can change the way that it looks, the timeline, how the clips are being previewed. I can change the size of it, and I can also change the duration. So if I do something like that, then I have a very long clip. Maybe that's too much. That's too much. So I just shorten it up so we have room for a few more clips. So now I have a clip here positioned in the timeline, and I can again preview it with the key combination J, K, and L. And K I did not mention before, but K basically just stops the playhead. So if I scrub forward by using L and press K, then the playhead will just stop. And the white line here is what we call the playhead. So now my clip is adjusted and on the timeline. And the cool part here is that I can actually adjust it on the fly. I can make it shorter or longer directly by just dragging the ends of this clip. So you might notice something weird is going on in the clip here. Let's just try and replay it so I can show you what I mean. The camera sort of wobbles. We want to get rid of that part. And how do we do that? We do that by using some of the tools that is available for modifying the clip. And those are available from this menu. And you can see they also have shortcuts. So instead of using the mouse clicking around, then you can just use the keys that is listed in this section. And the tool that we want to use for this task is the blade tool, because that will allow us to cut the timeline. What we're going to do now is we're going to scrub forward until we find the point in the timeline that starts the section that we want to remove. And that's got to be maybe around here. So what I do now is I press B to get the blade tool. So now I have this little nice blade tool. I just put that on the playhead and make a cut. I will go to the end of the part that we want to remove. And that might be something like this, where we go upwards on the lamp. And then I repeat the procedure by just cutting the timeline. So now I've cut a piece of the timeline, and then I can go back to my select tool by pressing A. So now I have the option to select the part that I want to remove. And to remove that, that's pretty simple. You just press backspace, and then the clip disappears, and the timeline closes nicely around the section that you just removed. So now I remove that part, so then let's see how it looks. See, it's still a little bit choppy here, so it's not ideal. So I can fine adjust it by just pulling this one a little bit forward. And then maybe I can adjust it a little bit this way. So you can play around with this until you have a fairly decent result. Let's add a few more clips to this video. And I want the part where I'm approaching the castle. So I press I to indicate my key in. And we got to stop the clip around here. So I'm pressing O to indicate my key out. So now I have a selection here, and I press E for making a jump to the timeline. Let's pick one from the last part here. Again, I repeat the same procedure. I scrub back and forward with the J and the L keys. Let's say that I want to have it like when I enter the garden here. So I key in here with the I, and then I let it go for a while here. And then I finalize my clip when I see the bridge with these two girls walking, like that. And again, I press the E to make it jump to the timeline. So now I have the clips positioned on the timeline. And you might notice that I mentioned the magnetic timeline, and you saw a little bit about the power of that one by removing the clip that we just did before. Let's say that I want to reorganize my video and have clips in a different order. That works simply by highlighting one clip and just moving it to another position in the timeline. And you see everything closes up nicely. So now I have a nice timeline here. And again, I can move back and forward with the key combinations J and L and stop with the K. So that will give me a very easy way of previewing the work that I've just done. I do want to mention that on the clips that you can download from the description below, there is an audio track below here. I just removed that for this tutorial because that will sort of destroy it. Every time I play the clip, it will destroy the audio in this tutorial. When you play with this at home, you will have the full audio track and you will be able to see the waveforms below each clip. Time out. Let's take a break. If you're not already a subscriber, then consider subscribing to my channel, because there will be a lot of useful tutorials coming your way. Also hit the little bell next to it, because that will get you notified automatically every time I post a video. Thank you, this is much appreciated. Let's move on to adding a title and a nice intro to this footage. And you do that by going into the titles and generating a sidebar up here by just pressing that one. And in here we have several options that we can choose from. And the first thing that we would do is we want to pick a generator, which is basically the opening picture for the movie. Let's just, for the sake of it, choose this industrial one. That's pretty simple and pretty basic. And then I press the playhead where I want this clip to go. And instead of pressing E, because that will put it in the end of the timeline, I press W, and then we'll just jump in the position where I have put my playhead. So now I have this industrial background before the video starts. If I want to add a title on top of that, I just go to the title section, and there is a bunch of stuff that I can select and put on top of this. So what I normally do is I will pick the custom one. And what you need to do with that one is you need to drag it down to the timeline. What you will notice is that this custom text has a certain length. And that is basically when it starts and when it disappears. And we can change that directly on the timeline by just pulling and pushing this back and forward. You can also cut it with the blade tool if you think that is easier. But in this way, I can modify it and I can put it like this. And the way that this timeline works is that it works for, like if you're looking from the top down. So everything that's on top is visible first. And this is why you can see the title now. If I for some reason decided to put the title below the main timeline, I'm not able to see it. So it needs to be on top. I can go in here and I can modify the title like that. Let's say sample video like that. And I can of course also select that it needs to be a different font. Let's go up here and let's take this one, and I can make the size bigger and I can move it to another location. You can modify basically everything from within the inspector window that you would expect from a font. So now we have a nice headline on the video. Start headline here. Maybe it's a little bit too long, this intro. Let's cut it down to half like that. Shorten up the text as well. So it will look something like this. And you might notice that the way that it transitions from the intro to the video clip, that is a little bit harsh. In that way, we need to add a transition. The way we do that is that we can use a standard dissolve transition in a very easy way. And the way that you add a dissolve transition is that you go in here, in this position, and then you simply just press Command T, and then it will add a transition. So now we have a nice dissolve transition. And if I play it, you can see that this industrial generator background dissolves into the footage from the castle. So by using Command T, that makes it very easy to add this standard transition. There is a lot of other transitions available in stock from the Final Cut. They are located under this icon, and you can play around with that if you don't like the standard one. But be careful, it might very easily look like a home video project if you sort of abuse this function. So I try to stay with very simple transitions like the dissolve and this hard cut like this one. If you watch any professional work done out there, they are not messing around a lot with these transitions. They keep it very basic. You can decide the duration of your transition when it should start by just expanding it like that. So if you want it to start earlier, you just expand it like that. Then you get a result that looks something like this. This is of course a very, very basic introduction to Final Cut, but I believe it's important to get you started with some very simple, easy to follow steps, because then we can add on to the complexity and throw in a lot of crazy stuff that will take your video skills to a completely new level. So this is the timeline like it is right now. Let's say that we want to add one more of these transitions just for the sake of it. So I go to this position and I press Command T, and it will throw another dissolve, and that will show you maybe a little bit better how it looks when you transition between two video clips like that. So that's kind of neat. It's very neat and very elegant that it goes from one clip to the other. Final thing that I want to show you is the effects tab. And of course we could spend a lot of time with the effects tab. From the effects tab, there is a lot of effects that can be applied to the footage, and it's pretty smart that you can preview them directly by just hovering over the effect. And let's say that we want to do the last part of the video in black and white. I just take this effect and drop it onto the footage. So this is as much as I would talk about effects in this video. I will cover this a whole lot more when we get further down the road in this series of tutorials. Also color grading with Final Cut, I will cover that in a separate video. Alright, let's say that you are perfectly happy with the edit that you have done so far, and it's time to render it out to a video that can be used on social media. The way you export your project into a final video is by pressing this share icon. And that will open several options like Facebook, YouTube and Vimeo, where you can render directly to these social medias. But for the sake of this video, I will just make a 1080p file to my local hard drive. So I press here and I get this dialog where I can alter the metadata for the video like that. I can add a little description here like that, and I can also add some tags if I want to do that. And that's important of course if you upload to social media, but we're saving it to local hard drive. It's not that important. We can just jump under settings. There's a few things that you need to be aware of here. The default selection is Apple MPEG-4 movie, but you can change that so it's a standard MPEG-4 file by selecting computer from this menu. But you will also notice that the file size actually increases to the double size. So we want to keep it because we're on an Apple device, and wherever I decide to use this movie, that will support the RAW format from Apple. So that's very nice, half size. We appreciate that. I can also decide if I want to prioritize a faster encoding or I want better quality. And this is a 2011 iMac, so that's pretty fast at the rendering, so I will always choose the better quality. I could have decided if the RAW project was done as a 4K file, just to downsample it to 1080p in this option. I can't go the other way because my timeline was 1080p, even though the raw footage was 4K. That is basically the settings that you need to know before you start the export. Then you just press share, and then the software will start rendering the movie. You can follow what's going on up here from this window. And as I mentioned, this is a pretty iffy Mac, so it does not take it very long. I think it's less than 20 seconds to render this movie. Now the video has been rendered out. Let's go and find the final movie. That can be sort of a puzzle if that is your first time. It will store all the videos in a folder called Home Videos. So this is what we just made, the project that we just made. One thing that that teased me a lot in the beginning is it's actually not very logical where Apple is placing the files. So I just want to show you how I did that to make sure that I could find the videos exported every time when I'm not uploading directly on social media. Let me just go in here like that. See, this is the path. It's placed inside the YouTube iTunes library under Home Videos. A small pro tip is that you locate this folder and then you basically just drag it out here, so it's easy accessible every time. In that way, you don't need to be frustrated about finding your videos when you have exported them. And it's pretty strange that Apple didn't include some sort of a link in this section for easy access to the files. But they're located here, and by pulling the library into the file structure over here, it's very, very easy to get access to the final product. That's it. That was a basic introduction to Final Cut Pro. I hope you liked this episode. If you did, then make sure to like it. If you didn't like it, then feel free to press the thumbs down twice. Take care, and I'll be seeing you next week.